Hello and welcome, everyone. We are here. This is Evo Heyning at Playable Agency. Joining me today, we have Kevin. Kevin, would you tell us just a little bit about yourself and what you do in this amazing virtual world?
Sure. So I am a interactive or virtual reality filmmaker. We use all sorts of 360 cameras in order to capture scenes with actors and different talent subjects, and we're able to edit this and put it all together. And we've worked with a number of different organizations, ranging from the 49ers all the way to Intel and Stanford University, doing virtual tours. So we have a pretty large background. Recently, press release just went out about a piece that we shot around harassment training, putting you in the bodies of different people and giving you an example of what they go through in the workplace every day. And it's all shot in VR. And yeah, and so I recently finished a project all about the Paradise wildfire, sorry, I got a little tickle.
The Silence in Paradise piece, if I remember.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and put up the URL because we're going to talk a little bit about virtual storytelling and how people engage with these stories, where they are, where they live, how people are sharing them. And so this is what we're seeing is a 13-second clip from Silence in Paradise, right?
That's correct. And so basically this was a piece that brought together a lot of different filmmakers who went up there to film different short 360 pieces, and we kind of put it all together to tell a larger story. And I think very much with the wildfires currently going on around the world, it's very, very timely, and it's something that I think, for me, I wanted to show politicians and other people this footage, so that way maybe we can change the laws and change, the way we deal with wildfires, because it seemed like a problem that wasn't going away in 2018, and certainly in 2020, it seems very much still in the public consciousness because of the ongoing wildfires in California.
Right. So, Kevin, now you and I have known each other and have collaborated a few times, starting in 2017, correct?
Yeah.
So we've worked on a number of 360, 180, VR, and unreleased stories as well, things that maybe are only on YouTube or never even reach the public. Silence in Paradise, this one piece that we're talking about now, came out of a bit of a collaboration in terms of creating a hackathon and then collecting locals and regional leaders together. And then you went up to Paradise with your drone, I believe on the very first day that we could get in, you were there right away. Can you tell us a little bit about what it's like being a VR filmmaker in the midst of a tragedy?
Yeah, it was very difficult day for a lot of people there. We were there trying to capture everything that had occurred, because just seeing the standard video square format of things, you don't really get a sense of the entire town being destroyed around you. So we attached 360 cameras to drones and flew them over different parts of the town, and you could just see tons of cars that were just burned out, and it was really really sad. Many people who watch our piece in VR will experience that and remember that and know what it's like to really go through a natural disaster such as a wildfire. And we'll be premiering this piece online for anyone with a VR headset on YouTube on the anniversary of the fire, which I believe is November 8th. Let me double check.
Yeah, November 8th and 9th, if I recall. It's coming up in the next week.
Yes.
And so you've released, it looks like on Apple Podcast and Spotify Podcast, you've released additional interview content with locals from Paradise in the region. Is that correct?
Yep, we put up some podcast interviews because we went there and interviewed people around the 1 year anniversary. So we went up there twice actually to show kind of the rebuilding, or maybe lack thereof, sadly. And yeah, so it's really powerful piece. We have two generations of families, a daughter, and then her parents, and the parents, their house burned down. The daughter's house, thankfully, survived, but the parents ended up having to move away from paradise. And you hear these stories, and they're very powerful. But at the end of the day, you're trying to whittle it down to a 6-7 minute piece, and so you end up losing some parts. And we just decided to post it as a podcast online as well. And so this is something that I think a lot of people should think about, because climate change is certainly on the ballot this year. Everyone right now in the U.S. has either voted or is voting, and it's something that we need to constantly be thinking about. How can we prevent another paradise from happening? Because it's really tragic that this is the deadliest wildfire in the United States in modern U.S. history. And we almost had the similar thing happen this year. A lot of people passed away from those fires.
And it's difficult to understand the scope and the scale of losing a whole city to a wildfire until you see like your drone footage, for example. And in that short, which you mentioned, it was 6 or 7 minutes of the original content, and then you've added now the rebuilding of paradise as the last sort of chapter in the short. But that's powerful, and it builds empathy. I guess why did you choose to keep it at that length? And what decisions, as you put on your storyteller hat, right, as director, but also as a producer in this case, what made you decide to keep it at that length and then to release it direct to the public via places like YouTube?
Well, that length was pretty much decided by how much footage we had. We didn't have footage in 360 of the actual fires because nobody was there who had one of those cameras rolling, and many people kind of were curious about that type of footage. We ended up using news footage to kind of cover the beginning and explain that. But basically, for me, we decided on YouTube because we wanted this to be very publicly accessible. We want as many people to see this as possible, and just seemed like the right place to put it. Right now there isn't really a lot of places for short VR films in terms of distribution on Netflix or these other platforms. So they're not really getting the exposure I think that they could get. But I think a lot of this comes down to the synergy that needs to happen with companies like Oculus and HTC, and companies like Disney and Amazon and Netflix. And right now, those new school, VR companies and the old school media standard streaming platforms are not having, a good time together. This is why you get companies like Big Screen VR, where you can watch something in 3D and in a theater, and that came out of somebody completely independent of the studio system. So I think that in order to make these sort of things work with new technology, new types of storytelling, we really do need the big players like Netflix and Amazon and Disney, Hulu, throw their skin in the game, and have VR filmmakers, have 360 filmmakers or VR 180 filmmakers be a part of their platform, and say that you can get some cross-platform synergy there. Because a lot of what we produce, I think a lot of people watch on their computers and use their mouse to move around. And certainly Netflix loves interactive stuff, but they've never put out a 360 film on their platform, which I find mind-blowing in the year 2020. And I have a lot of respect for Netflix. They're very forward-thinking, but this is an area where they're lacking.
So with Netflix, for example, they've gone interactive but not immersive. Some of the other FANG companies have embraced both. So Facebook obviously tried to vertically, put everything in its Oculus silo, including big screen. For example, these other sort of indie companies that it's been trying to consolidate and accumulate in order to, in some ways, capture as much of the VR audience as possible. But that's a very closed off silo that becomes a sort of market behemoth, so to speak, at least in English language VR. When we look at the sort of lack of integration, right? So you spoke to places like Amazon, for example, Netflix. These are opportunity spaces for these companies, if I'm hearing you right. And I see it too, to be frank. We see so many stories that are basically left on the table with no deal because they only have maybe 2-3 places to sell to. Is that what you're seeing? So you've been through the festival market and then the distribution market in both VR and in 360 storytelling. What else are you seeing out there in terms of go-to-market strategies and where they're working or not working?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, to go back to why YouTube, ultimately, everyone who has an Amazon Fire Stick can access YouTube and then be able to watch this content in 360, and you use your remote control, and you got your left, right, and you can move it left, right. And YouTube is the only company, Google's the only company that's really been keeping up to date on that sort of thing and those sort of updates. They've been funding these sort of initiatives like VR for good style things. Oculus has as well, but they're more focused on 6DoF, which doesn't have that cross-platform synergy with the standard, viewing. In a way, you kind of want to hook people from there and bring them into, maybe watching it in a headset or at least interacting with the media in a way that they've never done before. This is a piece we shot with the 49ers here, and you can see the whole idea was to try and post something, every week, and it was difficult because at the time, the companies were getting sued. The NFL companies were getting sued by the NFL because they were losing viewers, and so they didn't want any more social media going up. Now we're at a point in time where Oculus and the sports teams are working together, where they really need them in some ways because they can't get people in the actual arenas to watch things because of coronavirus.
Right. But that limits it only to those who have the Oculus headset. And then what happens to everyone else in VR?
Yeah. So I've always been against that with what Oculus does. It's a very closed platform. And they are very short-sighted in that way too, because they're never going to hook people from outside in. If you think about the one platform that everyone goes to, whether you're HBO, whether you're Oculus, whether you're Apple, everybody puts their content in one place on the internet for all eyeballs to see, a little teaser or longer episodes. And that one place is YouTube still, and they've just grown better and better. And they're really smart because they're also investing in other areas. Like I saw recently today in the news that they are funding the Blacklist, and they're funding $20,000 per scriptwriter, diverse scriptwriters, to work on a script.
Right.
So all you have to do is come up with an idea for a script and pitch it to them, and Google will finance your idea, $20,000 for you to just write it. And you need to be someone of a diverse background. That's important. But again, they're just thinking about their market at the end of the day. Maybe this is something they can get as an original movie that they put out on YouTube.
Right. And you've participated in partnerships in the YouTube studio space as well, if I remember right, around storytelling and homelessness, cultural events. Obviously, you've done a lot of sports, but you've also done these sorts of cultural tours, a pretty wide variety of experiences that you've provided in both 360 and also in 180. Outside of YouTube right now, is there anywhere else that you can sort of distribute this content openly to the VR communities?
I mean, you could post it as 360 on Facebook, and that is somewhat open. But again, you still need a Facebook account, I think, to view a lot of that type of content. And with YouTube, again, you don't need to be signed in. They don't need to be able to follow your data. They just want to give content. So you could say all these bad things about Google. At the end of the day, YouTube is one of the best things that you have out there, because you could literally watch, you can't catch up with YouTube at this point. There's so much
Yeah.
content.
It
And
is
there's
the
so much
closest thing we have to a public commons right now. But
Yeah.
what does monetization or participation in the value of your media look like? Like, are you able to get some return on investment for what you've put into it?
Not really. To be honest,
Mm.
I don't have a huge following on YouTube. I have like around 9,000 subscribers or so. And
Right.
it's not substantial enough to warrant, I think, at least I haven't seen under my ads a huge substantial amount as a monthly incentive to make you want to create content. You end up getting certain videos that hit, some viralness, and those are the main ones that continue to circulate and get you revenue. And so I've seen that with our Cat Town Cafe video that we did,
Right.
which features these amazing cats in a cat adoption center. And we did that piece for a client for a very cheap amount, and we said we would love to post that on YouTube. And now that video has paid more than what the client initially paid us at the end of the day.
Got it. So with the cat videos, that was profitable content that the engagement was so outvaluing, in the sense of it created so much, not just in terms of viewership, but people sharing it and liking it. This is Cat Town here, and obviously it's easy
Yeah.
to love that.
But for some reason, we didn't see that same leverage with the dog videos, which again, I don't know enough about it. This is one we did about a gun safety training, but this guy was also a marksman. It's pretty amazing.
Interesting. So cats rule the world. And
Yeah.
if you want to monetize on a social platform where you're getting very little participation, let's say a YouTube, for example, then go with things that are highly engaging, like animal videos.
Yep. And again, it's tricky because, I don't think that if we just posted straight cat VR videos, that would have been like a sure thing either. I think that it's sort of tapping into certain things that end up getting tagged. And when people look up cat VR, I think my thing just pops up as one of the top videos. Now,
Right.
if you can get a video, something VR at the top of every channel, then that's great, but that's still very, very hard to do.
Right.
There's a lot of things around that people have been filming for several years. VR is pretty much, I think VR is really becoming a lot more mainstream since 2015, when YouTube first opened it up for people. Now it's been 5 years later, and so the experiment is, all right, 5 years out, everyone has the camera, or at least the access to be able to get one of these cameras. Are people creating content in this realm? And I think at the end of the day, people are, but if it's only for YouTube, it's not a big enough market.
And it's not a viable business model for producer. If the distribution value and return on investment is never going to be what you put into it, you're going to keep having producers go out of business.
Yeah.
Like that's not a business model that works for anyone.
And it surprised me too, because if you look at the data around it, people tend to retain VR and 360 content a lot more when they interact with it. When they're
Right.
watching it, they feel like they're physically in a different location. So do you think that there would be a lot more of an emphasis on this from marketing and advertising perspectives? And to be honest, that's where we are seeing some different companies, like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, making a commercial in 360.
Right.
But they never make a full episode like that. It's just kind of like a one-off thing to hook people in, to be like,
Right.
oh yeah.
It's part of their marketing budget, but it's not the vital part of the story.
Yeah.
And I think part of this is we don't really have a great place to put VR stories. There's no market for that right now. What we have is Steam, which is a gaming place, and it will reject anything that it doesn't see as strict gaming, right? So even game shows, interactive stories, these kinds of like story games in general, like Queer Skins this past week said Steam was not allowing them to be hosted there because of themes. In this case, for them, because it has LGBTQ themes, it is not being hosted in the gaming market, right? So then where do you take these stories that don't fit? Right? Because I know you've done stories that don't necessarily fit on a place like YouTube. You've done festivals, but what else exists out there for those who aren't necessarily into the sort of YouTube monetization strategy?
You know, it's a tricky question. You know, you can't just put it on DVD and hope it sells. You know, I think a lot of people still wanted to believe that in the late 2000s. So like, hey, let's put it on DVD. Doesn't need to be out on YouTube. Put up a clip on YouTube. We'll sell a DVD. How many people do you know who have DVD players now?
Right.
So really, at the end of the day, it needs to live somewhere online. Vimeo, I don't know. I don't think that's a good option. I think Amazon has opened the door a lot more to people to be able to put up their movies and be able to sell them, and for longer format things, shorter format things. So I think YouTube is one avenue that, you know, they're easier access there than say Netflix.
Right.
And so many people have access to Amazon Prime that's been an area where I've put my work that is controversial. Like I did a film all about cell phone radiation and long-term health effects. Big
Right.
surprise, Netflix and a lot of these companies, you know,
they don't touch it.
Yeah. AT&T owns HBO. HBO doesn't want
not going to touch it. Yeah.
Yeah. And now, but at the end of the day, guess who did put it out? Amazon ended up acquiring it somehow. I think it was in a bundle package of stuff with FilmRise. Right. And so it's now on there, and it's reached widespread access to people who we'd never even think, like people in different countries reaching out to us saying, hey, this really inspired us to pass legislation here in Italy or wherever. Right. And so I think that has been very powerful. And, you know, you can say all day, oh, he should do better for corporations and the workers and things like that. And I agree with you. But under the film world, I think Amazon has helped democratize things a lot more for filmmakers in a way that YouTube kind of did. But, you know, again, with feature-length films and things that maybe can't be packaged on other platforms.
Right, because they took, for example, the Without a Box, they took all their festival content and then pushed it to Amazon Prime to boost the library. They didn't necessarily improve participation and profit for the filmmaker though, right? So it's the same problem as YouTube, where you're not actually getting the value back from the engagement. So you might get, you know, 5 million views and you're not going to see participation in the profit, correct? Is that, I mean, from other filmmakers, both, you know, the sort of traditional and non-traditional, we hear similar stories in terms of, let's say you spend $100,000 to make a documentary, you might get $10,000 in distribution rights deals total. So that's a loss of $90,000. You can't keep making losses over and over again. So how do you cope?
I get residual. So, you know, there are different ways that you can, you know, deal with your distribution, but the residual model is you get paid based on how many views.
Good. So residuals participation has been fractional, but there in terms of the Amazon market. And in YouTube, you can participate in your profits if you reach certain thresholds. But if you don't have 1,000 subscribers, you can't even live stream, right? Like currently,
didn't be like that either. I think a lot of the reason they did that is because of bootlegging. People creating a brand new channel, monetizing, then jumping off, and just downloaded other content. So I think there kind of does need to be a little bit of a threshold that someone's not just like post one video.
Right.
But like you're saying, 1,000 subscribers, too high of a threshold. Maybe.
Right. It doesn't work for a nonprofit organization, for example. VR and 360 are not accessible to nonprofits or anyone without money right now, as far as I can see.
I still think a lot of people don't realize that they are posting their content on Facebook, and there's money that could be made there from their content, right? My video that I post there, which I don't post my videos on Facebook, really. I used to. But basically, there's like, you know, $3 for whatever video you post. Mark Zuckerberg's just taking that, putting it in his pocket. YouTube is saying, well, we're going to take two of the dollars. Here's $1. And at least you're getting the $1 for your content. I think more and more people need to think about that, including with their photos. You know, we don't have a website that allows you to really monetize your photos in that way. You can say Flickr and things like that.
Right. The crypto markets like Steemit are the only kinds of real like value for media.
If YouTube were to, you know, flip a switch and say, you know, you picture, whatever they want to call it, put out something to compete with Instagram where you get 25 cents for every photo you post.
Right.
If you have 1,000 subscribers, then I think we're going to start to see a big shift there. Zuckerberg has always said that he wants to pay content creators, but he'll only pay the top 100 content creators, you know, so he never followed through with that.
Right. So then that's still going to just pull off this sort of small celebrity channels and nobody else.
The Beyoncés and whoever of the world get their paycheck from Zuckerberg to post on Facebook. Nobody else gets that money though. And YouTube at least democratizes it in a way that says, well, if people want to watch, you know, that crazy stuff, they can watch that and that person's going to make their money. If they want to watch something that's maybe important about the environment, maybe that will help out those people too. So, you know, that's kind of my takeaway.
Got it. So when you're thinking about creating new stories now, I know that you're constantly producing both shorts and features. How are you rethinking getting to your audience and engaging with them? What are the sort of new strategies or new modalities you're working with?
Well, I think that, you know, I don't want to talk too much about it. There's a piece I was going to start before the pandemic that was around holograms. And I think that's becoming more and more accessible in the way that 360 was a couple of years ago. And there are now more and more of these studios popping up in each and every city. And I think the ability to even just take your phone and being able to interact with it like that, walk through, create something in 6 DoF there versus 3 DoF. I think more people can engage with it, but you still need a story that tethers you.
Right.
And the challenge is those can only still be so short, but still I'm good at telling short stories in a couple of seconds, you know, being able to get something out there. So I think there's a lot that you can do in these different areas right now.
Right. Story games too, especially tied to sports teams that can't have people in the stadiums right now. You can build all types of, you know, mixed media gaming opportunities.
Exactly. But I am still, you know, very apprehensive about the headset market and, you know, whether people want to watch content with something strapped around their head that's not very comfortable.
Right.
And at the end of the day, you have your television, which you could put on and kick back and be very comfortable and not have anything that's impeding you from wanting to watch longer. You can watch 10 hours of Netflix and it will never stop. But if you were to put on a headset for like 10 hours, you'd start to like not be able to see and you're going to have some real issues there. And I've read about that on different Facebook forums. So I wonder when the other shoe will drop on that and we'll start to think more about the health and safety involved in VR headsets and maybe ways that we can mitigate that. You know, again,
and I think we're going to see more and more immersive distribution outlets that, let's say, you know, especially post-COVID, as people return to science museums and domes and being able to project this content in ways that is social. Because I think as we come back to the world again, I know it's going to take us another sort of year of climbing out of where we've been with this pandemic. But as we return to physical presence with each other, I think some of these types of stories we're going to want to take into physical places. And we're going to see, you know, like the MSG Sphere in Las Vegas, large scale domes may be our long-term distribution strategy even more than what's here in front of our heads.
Yeah. Or even potentially, like I see Looking Glass as an announcement coming up December 2nd. You know, they can make a laptop-sized 3D screen that, you know, I don't need to put on 3D glasses, and I can just put it on my desk and, you know, plug it into my computer and watch a 3D hologram. I'm sure that tons of people would want to buy that for Christmas and these different things. I just don't think we're quite out of the woods with the coronavirus yet.
Oh,
We're
not at all. Yeah.
in the theater indoors. But what's nice about the Sphere in Vegas that we're talking about, that's partially outdoor. I think the ceiling can open up a little bit. So I think that those are kind of the cool.
And it's still a year plus away. They're still under construction. At this point, everything we produce in 2021, it's almost like we're planning for 2022 and 2023 release strategies at this point.
I think that, you know, outdoor screenings, you can do a lot of really great stuff with that. Slam Dance is planning to do a limited, you know, festival, invite only in Joshua Tree outdoor, and you're going to have chairs and, you know, outdoor screening. I think that's genius. That's a great idea. And you're going to see more festivals replicate that model, and maybe theaters, because right now you can't get people really to go into the movie theaters, but you can get them to go to the drive-ins.
I was fascinated with this, both the drive-ins, the experiential portion of the drive-in, and then when I was hosting the Giant Screen Cinema Association's events, the IMAX theaters and the large screens are bouncing back much faster than smaller theaters. In other countries where theaters could reopen with less seating, they bounced back immediately. And that was surprising to me. But what I think is that there are certain types of immersive experiences that people still want to be able to have in a bigger physical space. It's satisfying to something that's inside of us.
I wish that Tenet had showed in more like drive-in theaters in the Bay Area. I would have gone, but I think there also should be like some tactile thing that hooks you, something physical. Like if they gave out like a little trinket for the movie, it's like, here's a little thing, limited edition, thanks for coming. People would go just for that little trinket, you know, the little like face mask thing that's like said Tenet on it. People would go for that and go crazy about it, and they could sell on eBay in 10 years and, you know, make a ton of money. And instead, the marketing people behind all that stuff are just, their minds are in the gutter, and they're just like putting out trailers. They're just like returning to theaters. And we're like, yeah, no crap. I read that in like 10 articles today. And really, at the end of the day, they need to think about what's going to hook people to want to go to a theater. And for me, it's like, if I can't get popcorn or soda or something, give me like a cool trinket. You know, like the film that I saw in the drive-in, All In, the Vote for Democracy, about Stacey Abrams, they gave you popcorn, but they also gave you like an official little ticket and like something kind of neat. So I think things like that. Oh yeah, here's my website. Feel free to check it out. We got a lot of cool content there. You can see some of our clients that we worked with. We do a lot of data testing as well. Yeah, that was fun for the Halloween time.
And Kevin, you and I both do a fair amount of R&D for the industry. So I mean, I have you here at YouTube, but like we've done test shoots with Adobe. I've had you over to the Mozilla offices when I was a part of XR Studio. You are a fantastic sort of R&D partner. It sounds like, especially in terms of cinematography and figuring out how to do maybe a complex shoot or a sports team shoot, an immersive shoot. What are the kinds of projects you like to work on most?
I mean, I'll do anything. It's just, you know, honestly, doing things that are different or new that you've never done before are kind of the most exciting. But obviously, whenever you're working with narrative and actors, that you're kind of in that realm. With sports, you're always in that realm because you don't know where the football or the baseball is going to go. Same with music for the most part, but it's a bit more staged. But I'm up for anything, you know, especially if it's trying to do something creative in VR that's never been done before. We love doing the never been done before stuff in VR, and that's always like kind of the coolest stuff. Yeah, we put a camera on a dog, and like it was the first 360 camera on a dog running around. And, you know,
is that what this is?
Replicate.
No, this is Pet Parade.
Yeah, Pet Parade. This one was a surprising video. I shot it in a day, edited it in a day, and it's like our number 3 video right now that everybody just loves going into 3D and seeing pets walk by him. We got some bubbles going on in the air. And yeah, it's just a beautiful day in Berkeley.
So it sounds like if if there are others in there who are considering both virtual storytelling and what kinds of stories are engaging and interesting for audiences, these sorts of event-based social interest stories, places that let you see inside a city or a beloved experience, right? So a theme park, or I mean, you've done all types of places, but also definitely the animals. Are there other tips you would give to the other storytellers who might be watching today?
I mean, if you're going to make something in 360, think about how you're going to use the medium, use both sides of the lens. If you're going to do something in 3D, think about the 3D space and, that. In this video, I ran into this guy who had this 3D camera right there. And, it just so happened to be like, oh, let's talk about this because we're filming in VR 180, which is stereoscopic too. Kind of like a parallel universe, Kevin. It was so weird. Look at this. One was wearing like the same outfit, kind of like looks like an older brother or something. Yeah, I don't know who that guy is. I don't think I've met him since.
Absolutely. Well, you and I have gone out and have shot all sorts of wonderful things, both out in the streets and in communities. If there are others here who are watching or happen to connect with Kevin and I, I'm going to go ahead and put your URL up one more time, Kevin, so that people can find you as well as our team here at Playable. I'm Evo Heyning, and this is Kevin Kunze. You can find him at kevinkunze.com to watch more of these great videos. And Kevin, as you're as you are thinking about the next generation, are there any other types of seeds you want to throw out into the world as we're thinking about creating new types of distribution strategies, or maybe even new types of channels and networks for these kinds of stories? What do you think we need to do most?
I don't know. I think it's just about trying to plug into, how are younger folks experiencing media and how do they participate in it? And obviously things are a lot more interactive now since everyone has a cell phone after like age 13 or whatever the age may be that people get them. But, I think that because people interact with their media constantly, YouTube comment, and, I think it's weird that Netflix and these other bigger platforms don't have more interactivity, especially for longer format things. My way of interacting with it sometimes is with HBO stuff. I'm watching the Nicole Kidman murder mystery thing. I go on Twitter and I use the hashtag, and then I say, oh, I think this guy was the murderer. I think that person was the murderer because of this. And you bounce ideas off and put up GIFs and you see people interact in that way. But I wish that there was a way that I can like tune in with my brother at the same time. And he's in Connecticut, I'm here. We're both watching the show and having a little conversation as we're watching. And Netflix and them are trying to do this. But, at the end of the day, I think a better model for Netflix would be think about Facebook, think about, can I add friends? And how many of my friends have watched this movie this week? Oh, I need to watch that movie because Eva watched and she gave it 5 stars. It must be really good. Netflix initially had this a couple of years ago.
Right.
DVDs. But.
Right. And they've brought back the watch party, but this sort of friends of friends recommendations, people have definitely dropped out of their interface. And perhaps that sort of social discovery, that sort of finding friends through our friends networks, and then being able to curate our own networks, right? So having these more open participatory media platforms, perhaps open and owned by the people who create the content instead of owned by somebody at the top like a Zuckerberg who may or may not have your best interests at heart. Kevin, this has been fantastic. Thank you for joining me today as part of Playable Open Office Hours. If you're looking for Kevin's work, it is right here, kevinkunze.com. You can also look him up. Definitely check out his 360 videos on YouTube especially. And from all of us here, I am Evo Heyning at Playable Agency. And if you need any support in terms of your virtual events, virtual productions, feel free to hit me up here, there, and everywhere. And And thanks a lot. I'm
Thank
going
you
to
for
take
having
us
me.
out today with a super cool time lapse of a dome being built so that
Ooh,
everyone can see a little bit of the future of media in progress. Thanks a lot for joining us today.
thank you for
Bye.
having me. Have a great day.
Bye.
At Evans and Sutherland, we're building, innovating the next generation giant dome display. We're investing in the future, in your institution, your audience, and your success. Dome X LED domes will change the way we experience immersive cinema. See for yourself at our new demonstration facility. Opening this year at Evans and Sutherland.